Hi all and welcome back. In an upcoming video we're gonna make the installation of a booster plug into the Africa Twin, which is this little puppy here. Unfortunately on the Africa Twin this is quite a cumbersome install. These plugs connect into the air temperature sensor, which is located under the air box, which is located under the tank. So basically you need to take off all the fairings, the gas tank and the air box to install it. But we're going to do that in a different video. So this is the booster plug. There are some electronics in here. There's a temperature sensor and the plugs that connect to the bike. You get these specific for each bike. But before we install it, I thought I'd go through at least my simple understanding of the concept behind the booster plug and similar devices. This all comes down to the air-fuel mixture in the engine, where you have a theory called the stoichiometric mix, which says that a ratio of 14.7 to 1, the 14.7 being air and the 1 being fuel. And this is a mass ratio, so in liters this would calculate to some 9,200 plus liters of air for every single liter of fuel. This is the theory. The problem is, of course, that in a real world scenario this wouldn't work. Your bike wouldn't run properly on it due to evaporation processes and everything. So the mixture in the bike needs to be slightly richer than this in order to work and function properly. The other issue is that bike manufacturers today, they need to certify their bikes to certain regulatory demands, which in effect gives the bike manufacturer in a modern bike today, they aim for approximately 14.4 to 1 ratio, which is richer than the stoichiometric mixture, but it is leaner than would be optimal for the bike. There are, in my mind, there are two main reasons to alter the mixture of the engine. One of them is power, and the optimum mixture as far as power goes is somewhere between 13.5 to 12.5 to 1, which is a lot richer than this. Richer meaning there is a higher part fuel in the mix compared to the air. The second one is rideability. Rideability is how the bike feels. So especially in low RPMs, in idle and during acceleration, the smoothness of the engine is what I'm referring to as the rideability. And the best rideability is somewhere around 13.6-ish to 1. So having a mixture somewhere around 13.5 to 1 rather than the 14.4, which the manufacturer sets up the bike for, would give a better bike. Slightly more power. We're not talking you're not going to get like 30 more horsepower or anything like that, but it's going to feel slightly more powerful, and you're definitely going to increase the rideability as far as low RPM driving and acceleration, as far as in addition to the idle. So this is what we want to achieve, and there are several ways to achieve this. there are complex systems such as the power commander and similar, all the way down to the easiest things, which is basically just installing a resistor that tricks the air temperature sensor. And this is where we get into how the booster plug works, where in the bike you have an ECU. Basically that's the computer that says how much fuel to put into the mix. So first of all, you have a map, the fuel map. This is the thing that is typically altered if you install a power commander and you run it in dyno. You'll be making a custom map. The map is really just, it's picture a three-dimensional map like this, where you have boxes. So basically you'll have 16 boxes. The last ones will be larger like this, and they'll get smaller and smaller, and the same towards the top here. And you fill this in, so 16 by 16, around 256 boxes, where the axis here represents the RPM of the bike. The axis up here, represents the throttle position, and every single cell has a value which is the fuel. So basically, as soon as you twist the throttle, you'll pop up on this axis here. As soon as the RPM on the bike increases, it'll go on this axis here. So as soon as one of those change, you'll change cells, and then you'll get a different fuel value. This is the map. This is the default, which basically measures the throttle positions, measures the RPM, and gives a fuel or a value of how much fuel to put in. Then there are other boxes that will alter that. First of all, you have the OTS, the oil temperature sensor. This basically tells the ECU the temperature of the engine of the bike. In older carburetor bikes and stuff, you had a choke in order to enrich the fuel mix during startup from a cold engine. This does the same thing. So when the bike reaches operating temperature, this basically does nothing, because then it's back to the default. But in a cold start, this will enrich the mix, basically. Then you have the air pressure sensor, which will compensate for pressure differences, being at altitude, high pressure weather, low pressure weather, etc. So this will, in a high pressure situation, this will add more fuel to the mix. And then you have the last box here, which is the air temperature sensor. And that will increase the fuel if it gets colder, basically. So you need more fuel in a cold environment. This is the ambient temperatures. It measures the temperature outside of the bike. And all of these combined leads to a fuel value for the ECU. What the booster plug does is interfere in here, or rather on the top. Well, it's actually, yeah, we can put it like that. The concept is that inside the booster plug there are electronics that will measure the ambient temperature in and of itself, in addition to the sensor on the bike. And then the electronics here will alter the signal from the ATS to the ECU in order to trick the bike into thinking it's colder than it is, and by that enriching the fuel mix. This is what is called the open loop system. On modern bikes you also have an extra box. I'll put a picture up from the Africa Twin, you can see where it is. And that is the Lambda sensor. The Lambda sensor sits in your exhaust and measures or detects oxygen molecules flying past. So basically having oxygen molecules in your exhaust will mean that the fuel mix is too lean, there is too much air in the mix. So oxygen is not being combusted completely in the cylinder, and by that it is going out the exhaust port to the exhaust and being picked up by the Lambda sensor. This then sends a signal to the ECU saying that, hey, I found some oxygen here, so you might want to enrich the mix. Now the fun thing about the Lambda sensor, because this will override what's going on in the open loop. So when you add this one, you get what is called a closed loop. The fun thing about it is that, and the reason why the BoosterPlug can still work without interfering with the Lambda sensor, is that the Lambda sensor doesn't work when the bike is idle. The ECU will just ignore what's happening on the Lambda. It doesn't work when it is in open loop, which is when it's changing cells in the fuel map. It'll basically need to have a stable throttle position, a stable RPM for somewhere between 1 and 3 seconds before it'll start taking the Lambda sensor signal into consideration. And that means that what you do here will affect the idle, the low RPM driving when the Lambda sensor is being ignored. And it'll also affect accelerations when you are going up on the throttle position and you are increasing the RPMs of the bike. So during an acceleration you'll never have a steady throttle position and RPM for the required amount of time in order for the Lambda sensor to kick in. As soon as you hit the highway, get a steady speed, steady RPM, steady throttle position, then the Lambda sensor will override, so the BoosterPlug will have no effect at all. And that gives you better fuel mileage. In contradiction to other systems that typically require you to remove the Lambda sensor and create a custom map instead, which will then have you in open loop all the time because you have no Lambda sensor to sense what's going on in the exhaust. So that means that you won't get the same benefits from the Lambda as you do with the BoosterPlug. And really on low RPMs and during acceleration, that's when you want that extra rideability. That's when you want that extra power. So it's quite a fascinating system. So that's pretty much how it works. Easy explanation. I'm not a technical engineer in this in any way, shape or form. So I would love inputs on it. If anyone has comments or something, put them down below. If someone with better knowledge about this, like Matthew over at the workshop or someone like him wants to fill in and make a better explanation, then go right ahead. I'd be very happy to see that. So next video will be the installation of the BoosterPlug on the Africa Twin, and I'll see you there.